I think today on Focus Point, Kelly Ott is going to talk about mentoring.
Mentoring, yes, that wonderful nugget to help those novice practitioners. We were
Yes.
kind of talking about that the other day. We're thinking about how we first started and who our supervisors were and what kind of advice we received. Because grad school does such a great job of preparing you for real life practice. And there's never any gaps, right? We joke
Oh
about the gaps
no.
between grad school and your clinical practicums. But how do we help the novice practitioner, whether it be a speech language pathologist or a PT, OT educator? How do we help them bridge some of those gaps between what they've learned and actually working in the field?
Right. And I think when I look back upon my mentoring, I had great mentors. First of all, I was very fortunate, and they modeled a lot of ethical issues in their practice, and that stuff really isn't written in black and white. You have no idea all the ethical dilemmas you're going to be
Mm-hmm.
placed in, and you would never learn that in a textbook in grad school. You had to learn that from a really good mentor. And I think that is a huge piece that's missing nowadays, and it's a concern that I have.
It is a concern. I was thinking about some of my mentors, and they were all great and all had their areas of strength, but they all had their areas of weakness
That
too.
is true.
And so it's interesting, every learning opportunity is just that. You take a little bit different information from each experience. One thing that I always admired about some of my mentors is that they had very strong opinions and they would always give those opinions, but they would also always give the opposite side.
Oh, yes, and I would say I had the same, in that they would say to me, if this is the method you're going to use, you need to be able to understand the evidence behind it, but you also need to understand the counter claims to it and what someone might say against that method, and you need to be prepared for that. You have to know all the angles.
Right. And being able to debate that and defend, orally being able to defend
Right.
what you're doing and why you're doing it.
But in a collegiate, professional way,
Mm-hmm.
and not in an argumentative, sarcastic way.
Right.
It was a skill set that we were taught.
It was. And practice routinely because,
Yes.
every time we had to prepare a therapy session or a lesson or whatever it was, we had to defend and explain. So it was
Yes.
part of our daily practice. Not only were we planning these sessions and implementing these sessions, but we had to be able to orally defend what we were doing, why we were doing it. We had to analyze what worked, what didn't work, what could we change. I mean, that was all part of our training.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
from college to clinical practice to mentorship after the fact. So it's really kind of a hierarchical approach, I guess, to learning to be able to defend what we're doing and why we're doing it. But it was all based on this mentor protege relationship where, someone is giving you this advice and you're taking that advice and you're determining what you're going to do with it. It wasn't like, oh, you're telling me I need to do this. Okay, let's
Right.
just do it.
Right.
You had to
Right.
figure out why. Why was that a good thing or not a good thing to do? Why would that work in this situation, but maybe not in another situation?
And we had a lot of face-to-face meetings. I remember we had a lot of time where we had to sit down and do that with our mentor and explain those things, or it was on the phone, or maybe through reports that they were reviewing, things like that. But that face-to-face time with someone who was guiding you through that was very important, and watching how they interacted with others too.
Right. And it was very humbling, I think, for me to sit down with my mentor and have them observe a session or record you in a session and pick that apart
Yes.
and go through and tell you what maybe you're doing well and maybe what you're not doing well, what you need to change. And what a learning opportunity, but you had to be open to those criticisms.
And I think you and I developed very thick skins because, we understood that
Right.
even though it was a little hard to hear sometimes, we knew that that person was giving us attention and time to make us better.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the most important thing. We kind of had to put our egos aside and be willing to accept some of this information to better ourselves.
Yeah.
So,
if you have the opportunity to have a true mentor, I think there's just no replacing. It's such a valuable opportunity to have that. I mean, we all have our collegiate relationships and our peer supports, but if you can find a true mentor that's going to help you problem solve and guide you in directions that let you think for yourself and determine appropriate versus inappropriate courses of action in your practice, it's such a worthwhile.
right. And even though sometimes they might be hard to find, it's definitely worth the search. And also looking for the qualities of someone who demonstrates that professionalism is another huge piece, and they demonstrate the ethics, and those hidden unwritten rules that we were talking about are really important if you can find that person.
Yeah. And to find someone that's not just going to tell you what to do and how to do it and leave it at that. There needs to be some explanation, some defense of what you're doing.
Kind of you want to find someone to teach you how to fish and who doesn't fish for you. That basic analogy, I'd say, is important.
And to always have a backup plan.
Oh, yeah. Plan B and Plan C. Those are important because just if you're in that one mode only, this is the only answer, it's really hard for you to come up with Plan B and Plan C if you haven't been mentally trained to do that, So that's a good point.
That's our thought on today's focus point, and hopefully you have had a very positive mentor experience.